The HOA budget report showed a $47,000 shortfall, and somehow my family's name was listed as the primary cause. I'm Luke Harris, 34, a software engineer who moved to Willow Bluff subdivision in Briarton, Wyoming, 3 years ago. I bought the corner lot at 1247 Maple Ridge Drive because it offered privacy and a decent commute to my remote work setup. The neighborhood seemed quiet. Professional families. Well-maintained lawns. The kind of place where people minded their own business. The Homeowners Association had always been efficient. Monthly dues of $215 covered landscaping, snow removal, and community amenities. The quarterly financial reports arrived like clockwork. Everything balanced, no drama, no surprises. Until last Tuesday. Griffin Brown, the HOA treasurer, knocked on my door at 7:30 in the morning. He held a manila folder, thick with documents. His expression was grim. "Luke, we need to talk about the association's finances," he said. "There's been a significant discrepancy." I invited him inside. He spread the papers across my kitchen table. Bank statements, expense reports, vendor invoices. The numbers didn't add up. $47,000 had vanished from the reserve fund over the past 18 months. The board conducted an internal audit, Griffin explained. Your family's account shows irregular activity, large withdrawals, unauthorized expenses. I stared at the highlighted entries. My name appeared next to transactions I'd never authorized, landscaping services I'd never requested, equipment purchases I'd never made. The documentation looked official, professional, convincing. "This is impossible," I said. "I've never accessed the HOA accounts. I don't even have authorization." Griffin's jaw tightened. "The paper trail suggests otherwise. The board is considering legal action." He gathered the documents and left. I sat in my kitchen, staring at the coffee growing cold in my mug. Someone had systematically framed my family for embezzlement. The board was detailed. Methodical. Whoever did this had access to HOA records, banking information, and enough time to create a convincing false narrative. I pulled up my personal banking records on my laptop. Every transaction was accounted for. No mysterious deposits. No unexplained income. My finances were clean. But someone wanted the HOA board to believe otherwise. I walked to my front window and surveyed the neighborhood. Hadley Brown lived 2 houses down with her employer's family. She worked as a live-in nanny for the Johnsons and had been friendly since I moved in. Always waving from the driveway. Asking about my work. Commenting on my landscaping choices. Maybe too friendly. The morning sun cast long shadows across the perfectly manicured lawns. Everything looked normal. Peaceful. But someone in this subdivision had spent months building a case against me. Someone with patience, access, and a clear motive I couldn't yet understand. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "The board meeting is Thursday at 7 p.m. Come prepared to explain yourself." I had 3 days to build a defense against accusations I didn't understand. The HOA meeting loomed like a storm front moving across the Wyoming plains. Tuesday morning, I drove to Briarton City Hall. The records department occupied the basement of a brick building that smelled like old paper and industrial carpet. I requested copies of all HOA filings for Willow Bluff subdivision dating back 2 years. "That's a lot of paperwork," the clerk said. "Might take a few hours." I paid the copying fee and waited. The documents filled 2 bankers' boxes. Articles of incorporation. Board meeting minutes. Financial statements. Vendor contracts. Insurance policies. Everything looked standard until I reached the signature pages. My name appeared on authorization forms I'd never signed. The handwriting was close, but not perfect. Someone had practiced my signature enough to fool a casual observer. But under scrutiny, the pen pressure was wrong. The letter spacing inconsistent. I photographed every forged document with my phone. 17 separate instances over 18 months, each one authorizing expenditures from the reserve fund. Landscaping services from Mountain View grounds. Security equipment from Alpine Safety Systems. Pool maintenance from Crystal Clear Services. I called each vendor. Mountain View Grounds had no record of work performed in Willow Bluff. Alpine Safety Systems confirmed equipment deliveries but to a different address across town. Crystal Clear Services had been paid for pool maintenance on properties that didn't have pools. The money had been redirected. Stolen. And my signature had authorized every transaction. Wednesday afternoon, I visited Briarton Community Bank. The HOA maintained accounts there. I explained the situation to the branch manager, a woman named Patricia, who'd handled my mortgage application 2 years earlier. I can't show you account details without proper authorization, she said, but I can confirm whether signatures match our records. I showed her the forged documents. She compared them to my signature card from my personal account. The differences were subtle but clear to a trained eye. These aren't your signatures, she confirmed. Someone's been practicing, but they missed the pressure points. Your natural hand creates deeper impressions on certain letters. She couldn't provide account statements, but she could verify that someone had been accessing the HOA accounts using forged authorizations. The bank's security cameras might have captured the transactions, but footage was only retained for 90 days. I was running out of time and... That evening, I walked through the neighborhood. Hadley Brown was in the Johnsons' front yard, pushing their toddler on a swing set. She waved when she saw me. "How's the software business?" she called out. I'd mentioned my work exactly once, during a brief conversation 6 months ago. Most neighbors forgot details like that. But Hadley remembered everything. She'd asked about my schedule, my travel plans, my income. Information gathering disguised as friendly conversation. "Busy season," I replied, studying her face for tells. She smiled and returned to the child, but I noticed her posture had changed. Shoulders tense. Movements more deliberate. Like someone trying too hard to appear casual. Thursday morning brought another revelation. I was reviewing the HOA's annual budget when I noticed the accounting software listed in the technology expenses. QuickBooks Enterprise. The same program I used for freelance projects. Someone familiar with financial software had created the false records. Hadley Brown had mentioned studying accounting in college. Another detail from our conversations that I'd filed away without thinking. The pieces were forming a pattern. Access to HOA documents through her proximity to board members. Knowledge of accounting software. Familiarity with my personal details. An opportunity during the 18 months she'd lived in the neighborhood. But I needed proof. I spent Thursday afternoon installing a security camera system. 4 wireless cameras with night vision and motion detection. One focused on my mailbox, another on my driveway. 2 covering the front and backyards. The footage uploaded automatically to cloud storage. If someone was still monitoring my property, I'd catch them. The HOA meeting was scheduled for 7 p.m. at the community center. I arrived early with my organized in a 3-ring binder. Bank statements. Vendor confirmations. Signature analysis. City records. Everything documented and cross-referenced. Griffin Brown entered with 3 other board members. They took seats at a folding table, facing rows of empty chairs. A few neighbors trickled in, drawn by curiosity or concern. Hadley Brown arrived at exactly 7 p.m. She sat in the back row, notebook in hand, ready to take minutes of my public humiliation. "This meeting is called to order," Griffin announced. "We're here to address financial irregularities in the HOA Reserve Fund. Luke Harris, you're accused of unauthorized access to association accounts and misappropriation of funds totaling $47,000. I stood and approached the table. "I have that proves my innocence and identifies the actual perpetrator." Griffin's expression didn't change. "Present your." I opened my binder and began with a signature analysis. The forged authorizations. The vendor confirmations. The redirected payments. Each piece of built on the previous one, creating an undeniable pattern of fraud. Someone with access to HOA records and knowledge of accounting software has been systematically stealing from the reserve fund, I concluded. They used my name to cover their tracks. The room was silent. Griffin studied the documents I'd presented. The other board members whispered among themselves. "This is very concerning," Griffin said finally. but it doesn't prove who committed these crimes. I turned to face the back of the room. Hadley Brown was no longer taking notes. Her pen had stopped moving when I mentioned the accounting software. Her face had gone pale. Actually, it does, I said. The person responsible is sitting in this room right now. Hadley Brown's notebook slipped from her hands and hit the floor with a sharp crack. The sound echoed through the community center like a gunshot. That's a serious accusation, Griffin said, his voice carefully neutral. Do you have proof? I pulled out my phone and opened the security footage app. I have video of unauthorized access to my property. Someone has been entering my backyard to photograph HOA documents I keep in my home office. The footage played on my phone screen. Clear images of Hadley using bolt cutters on my gate latch. Photographing papers through my window. Accessing my mailbox with a universal postal key. This shows systematic surveillance and document theft, I continued. But the real is in the financial records. I spread the bank statements across the table. Every fraudulent transaction corresponds with days when Hadley had access to the Hendricks home computer. She's been using their Wi-Fi and equipment to access HOA accounts. Griffin examined the timestamps. These dates match the Hendricks travel schedule. They were out of town for all of these transactions. Hadley had complete access to their home systems, I said. She knew their passwords, their financial software, their digital signatures for HOA business. The room erupted in whispers. Neighbors who'd avoided me for weeks now stared at Hadley with growing suspicion. This is ridiculous, Hadley finally spoke. Her voice cracked slightly. Luke is trying to frame me for his own crimes. I pulled out the vendor confirmations. Riverside Landscaping confirmed they never received payment for the playground renovation. The check was deposited into an account at First National Bank. Account number 4471882933367. Griffin's face went white. That's not our HOA account. No, it's a personal account opened 3 months ago under the name H. Brown Financial Services. The same signature appears on all the fraudulent authorizations. I handed him the signature analysis report. A certified handwriting expert compared the forged signatures to Hadley's employment application from the Hendricks family. Statistical match of 94%. Hadley stood abruptly. I don't have to listen to this. Actually, you do, said a new voice from the doorway. Detective Cameron Park from the State Revenue Investigation Unit entered the community center. He wore a dark suit and carried a leather briefcase. Behind him stood 2 uniformed officers. Ms. Brown, I have a warrant for your arrest on charges of embezzlement, identity theft, and fraud, Detective Park announced. You have the right to remain silent. Hadley's composure finally cracked. This is insane. I was protecting the HOA from Luke's theft. He's been stealing from the reserve fund for months. This suggests otherwise, Detective Park replied. We've been monitoring your financial activities since Mr. Harris contacted our office yesterday. I'd called the State Revenue Investigation Unit after discovering the fraudulent account. They'd been tracking Hadley's transactions in real time. The H. Brown Financial Services account received $47,000 in redirected HOA payments, Detective Park continued. You then transferred those funds to offshore accounts in the Cayman Islands. Hadley's face went ashen. I was going to return the money. It was just temporary. Temporary theft is still theft, Detective Park said. Officers, please read Ms. Brown her rights. The uniformed officers approached Hadley. She didn't resist as they placed handcuffs on her wrists. The metallic click echoed through the silent room. The State Insurance Regulation Watchdog Panel will be conducting a full audit of the Willow Bluff HOA finances, Detective Park announced to the room. We'll ensure all stolen funds are recovered and returned to the association. Griffin stood and addressed the neighbors. On behalf of the HOA board, I apologize to Luke Harris for the false accusations. We should have investigated more thoroughly before taking action. The other board members nodded in agreement. Several neighbors approached me with apologies and handshakes. How did you figure it out? Asked Mrs. Chen, an elderly neighbor who'd lived in Willow Bluff for 20 years. The timing was too convenient, I explained. Every accusation against me came right after HOA funds went missing. Someone was using me as a scapegoat. Detective Park packed his briefcase and prepared to leave. Mr. Harris, your documentation was crucial to this investigation. The State Revenue Office will need your testimony for the prosecution. I nodded. Whatever you need. As the officers escorted Hadley from the building, she turned back toward me. You have no idea what you've done. The Hendricks family trusted me. They trusted you with their children, I replied, not with stealing from their neighbors. The community center emptied slowly. Neighbors lingered to discuss the shocking revelation. Griffin approached me with the HOA financial records. We'll need to rebuild trust in the association, he said. Would you consider joining the board? We need someone with your investigative skills. I considered the offer. I'll think about it. Right now, I just want my life back to normal. Griffin handed me a formal letter. This is an official apology from the HOA board. We're also reversing all fines and penalties imposed on your property. The letter was typed on official letterhead and signed by all 5 board members. It acknowledged the false accusations and cleared my name completely. What about the other families Hadley might have targeted? I asked. Detective Park is reviewing all HOA transactions from the past 2 years, Griffin replied. If there are other victims, we'll find them. I drove home through the quiet streets of Willow Bluff. Porch lights glowed warmly in windows. Children's bicycles sat abandoned on driveways. The neighborhood looked peaceful again. My house felt different when I entered. The constant was gone. The paranoia had lifted. I could finally relax in my own home. I poured a glass of water and sat at my kitchen table. The binder lay open beside me. Months of investigation, condensed into organized proof of betrayal. My phone buzzed with a text message from Detective Park. Hadley Brown confessed to additional thefts totaling $73,000. Full restitution expected within 60 days. The scope of her crimes was larger than anyone had imagined. She'd been systematically stealing from the HOA for over a year, using multiple families as cover for her activities. I thought about the Hendricks family. They'd trusted Hadley with their most precious possessions, their children. She'd repaid that trust by using their home as a base for criminal operations. The next morning brought a knock at my door. Mrs. Chen stood on my porch, holding a casserole dish. I wanted to apologize properly, she said, and to thank you for exposing the truth. I invited her inside for coffee. We sat in my living room discussing the investigation and its aftermath. How did you stay so calm through all of this? She asked. I focused on the facts, I replied. Emotions cloud judgment, reveals truth. Mrs. Chen nodded thoughtfully. The neighborhood owes you a debt of gratitude. Over the following weeks, other neighbors stopped by with similar sentiments. The community slowly healed from the betrayal. Trust began to rebuild. The state revenue investigation concluded with Hadley's conviction on multiple felony charges. She received a sentence of 5 years in prison and full restitution to the HOA. The Hendricks family returned from their extended vacation to find their nanny arrested and their neighbors' trust shattered. They issued a public apology and offered to cover any remaining financial shortfalls. Griffin Brown was elected as the new HOA president. His first was implementing new financial oversight procedures to prevent future embezzlement. I declined his offer to join the board but agreed to serve as a financial advisor. My software engineering background proved useful for designing secure accounting systems. The Neighborhood Watch program was expanded to include financial monitoring. Residents learned to recognize signs of HOA fraud and report suspicious activities. Detective Park's investigation revealed that Hadley had targeted 3 other HOA communities in Wyoming. Her total theft exceeded $200,000 across multiple associations. The case became a model for state revenue investigations into HOA financial crimes. New regulations were implemented requiring independent audits and dual authorization for large expenditures. Justice had been served, but the scars remained visible throughout Willow Bluff. 12 months later, I stood in my backyard watching the sunrise over Willow Bluff. The neighborhood had transformed since Hadley's arrest. New families moved into the Hendricks' former home. Fresh faces brought renewed energy to our community. The HOA financial reforms I helped design were working. Monthly budget reports were posted online. Every expenditure required dual authorization. Residents received quarterly statements showing exactly where their dues went. Griffin Brown proved to be an excellent president. His transparency initiatives restored confidence in the association. Board meetings were recorded and archived. Financial records became public documents. My consulting work expanded beyond Willow Bluff. Other HOA communities requested my expertise in fraud prevention. I developed software systems that flagged suspicious transactions automatically. The state revenue department hired me as a contractor. My programs helped identify patterns in HOA embezzlement cases across Wyoming. Detective Park and I worked together on several investigations. I work with investigative reporters exposing HOA financial corruption, and I depended on them to publicize the systemic issues we uncovered. Their articles led to statewide legislative reforms requiring independent audits for all homeowner associations. The Hendricks family never returned to Briarton. They sold their house through a property management company. The new owners, a young couple with twin daughters, brought laughter back to that corner of Maple Street. Mrs. Chen became my closest neighbor friend. We shared coffee most Sunday mornings, discussing everything from gardening to local politics. She often thanked me for my persistence in exposing the truth. The Neighborhood Watch program evolved into a comprehensive community oversight committee. Residents monitored not just security but financial transparency across all local organizations. Hadley served 18 months before being transferred to minimum security. Her restitution payments continued monthly. The HOA recovered 90% of the stolen funds through her assets and insurance claims. I received a commendation from the Wyoming Attorney General's office for my role in the investigation. The certificate hung in my home office next to my software engineering degrees. The betrayal had shaken our community's foundation, but rebuilding that trust created something stronger than before. Neighbors knew each other better. Communication improved. Accountability became our shared value. My property values recovered and exceeded pre-scandal levels. The neighborhood's reputation for financial transparency attracted quality buyers. Willow Bluff became a model community for HOA governance. I still walked the same streets every evening. But now I saw vigilant neighbors instead of potential threats. Children played in yards while parents chatted over fences. The community's spirit had returned. The investigation taught me that suburban betrayal often hides behind familiar faces. Trust must be earned through transparency, not assumed through proximity. Verification protects communities better than blind faith. My software systems now monitor HOA finances in 47 Wyoming communities. Early detection prevents most fraud attempts. The few cases that slip through are caught within weeks instead of years. The silence of my neighborhood no longer felt ominous. It represented peace earned through vigilance and justice served through persistence. It was finally over, and the silence felt earned.